Peace and love, everybody. This is Brother Garvey from the Brother Garvey podcast. Today we have special guests and special invites that's going to be having a conversation about Islam, the origins of Islam in North America, as far as an African American experience. So we have today Dr. Patrick D. Bowen. He's a religious studies scholar who specializes in religious conversion and the history of non-mainline religions in the West. Most of his recent work examines conversion to Islam in the U.S. He has a BA in religious studies from Colorado University, and he also has a master's from the University of Denver. He was a part of the doctorate program of, the University of Denver Iliff School of Theology, where he specialized in Islam and the theory of religion. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, before I do bring on Dr. Bowen, I want to say that this show is particularly about Islam and it being in North America, not about going back to Prophet Muhammad and so forth. We're talking about from the African slaves came here and their development into conversion as far as Islam is concerned. So his area of expertise, of course, as a religious studies guy. So here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Patrick D. Bowen. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
No problem, my brother. And of course, I got my brother, Rawbon, who's making it upstairs. I don't know if he's ready, but everybody who's watching my channel pretty much familiar with Rawbon from the, formerly, well, he's a part of the Gods of Earth. He's a lifetime member, of course, but he has grown a lot in the last couple of years. All right. Dr. Bowen, I heard about you through Rawbon. He's going to be the person questioning you more. But let me ask you this. When do you see Islam came over on the slave trade? A lot of the slaves who came over on the transatlantic slave trade were already familiar with Islam as far as certain African cultures. But as far as the new version, if I may call it that, for lack of a better term, of Islam, meaning more westernized, when do you see African Americans or Black folks in general joining Islam? Around what time period?
1920. There's evidence that it preceded that. There's some, but we don't have hard evidence that there was something in the 1910s. But we have, of course, the reports of the Canaanite temple founded by Prophet Noble Drew Ali, 1913 in Newark, New Jersey. Hard evidence of that is hard to say. There are testimonies, but as a historian, I want to treat everything with historical claims with agnosticism. Okay. And especially as a member, someone who's not a member of, I'm not Muslim, I'm not African American. I'm completely outside. Right. And I didn't even know any Muslims and hardly any African Americans growing up. So I'm completely outside. Right. There's before that, there's evidence possibly of what's called the Mecca Medina Temple, established in 1910 in New York. But we don't know for sure if that was Islamic. It was Masonic with Islam in it, but we don't know if it required conversion to Islam or if people identified as Muslims and participating in that. There's possibly other evidence from before then, but everything before 1910 is extremely weak, in my opinion. And I would say hard. We do have evidence from 1916 to 1918 to 1920 of Noble Drew Ali practicing as Timothy Drew, as a Muslim teacher and a healer, mainly as a healer. And he reportedly had followers up and down the East Coast. But we don't know if that was organized as a formal religious movement. He was known as a healer and respected as a healer, is what the current evidence that I have seen can demonstrate satisfactorily. So that's my answer.
All righty. All right. All right. Nice. All right. So let me get to one of the first questions that Brother Rob put towards this conversation. Is it true that the 1893 Cairo Street World's Colombian Exposition is the site of the first Muslim mosque in America?
What do we define as a mosque? If the Hadith teaches that the whole world is a mosque, then a mosque can be anything. And when an enslaved person bows down and prays, are they in the mosque? And there is conjecture that a prayer building, I believe in North Carolina, I believe on the Sapelo Island in Georgia Sea Islands. I believe there's conjecture that the prayer building there was used as a mosque, but that's not fully established. So we have this concept, the broader concept of a mosque, that it could be anywhere you pray, especially if it's clean. We have the possibility, and I think the likelihood, that some structures were used by enslaved people as mosques. And if we want to talk about documented purpose-built mosques, we could say maybe that the Streets of Cairo exhibit is a mosque. We could say that. The community following Alexander Russell Webb, a white convert to Islam, who visited the World's Fair in 1893 as a speaker at the Columbian Exposition, the World Parliament of Religions. We could say that his community had a reading room and they had a call to prayer. Is that a mosque? So more or less, this is somewhat a political debate. And some people claim that the true first purpose-built mosques were not until the 20th century, in the early part with immigrants, like the mosque near the Ford factory, created in Detroit in around 1920 or 1921, or the Brooklyn Tatar Community Association that was founded, I believe, in 1905. They met in a building and presumably prayed there. Would that be considered the first mosque? There's all sorts of debates, but the 1893 date is strong enough for me to accept it as a possible. If we're going to date something, that's possible, and I would give it at least some credence.
Okay, beautiful. All right. As far as the what was the impact of the exposition pertaining to the spread of Islam?
Well, there are theories, and there's a few things that we know. So, for instance, the exposition supposedly, because hundreds and maybe more, I'm not sure of the numbers, of Muslims from Muslim majority regions came to the United States for the exposition, that there was possible transmission from some of those Muslims to Americans who were interested in Islam, and perhaps some conversion resulted as a product of that. Such as, well, there's the claim among the Black Shriners, the ancient Egyptian nobles of the Mystic Shrine, I can't remember the official name, that Rofelt Pasha, a Muslim with what I would consider a non-typical Muslim name, transmitted the ancient mystical teachings of the Shriner community at this time. There's no hard evidence of this, and there's a lot of reason to question it. But there's also good evidence that we have Muslim performers who came as acrobat performers or came as people who were presented as mystical figures. They may have been Sufis or followed other magical practices that they came. We have evidence of this. Or they may have been more traditional Muslim teachers and leaders, and they came and possibly transmitted Islamic teachings to Americans at the time. One of the theories is that they transmitted this Islamic teachings perhaps to other Americans who were involved in the performance and acrobatic and magical performance industries. And so one of the theories is that Noble Drew Ali himself had been influenced by these performers. And there is evidence that they settled, several of these individuals settled in, for instance, New York. And they would have settled in, because of segregation, of course, settled in African American majority communities. And so contact, in my opinion, contact was undoubtedly made. Whether there was transmission or not is much harder to say. And whether there's outright conversion is even harder to say than that. So that's how I feel on that.
Right. This question, Rob, are you there, my brother?
Yeah, I'm here now.
All right. You asked the question, did the advent of playing Eastern originate before the exposition? Do you understand that question, Dr. Bowen? Or you need some clarity on that?
No. Well, and maybe I could get some clarification, but playing Eastern, the term Susan Nance proposed in her book. Yeah. So she talked about playing Eastern going back to the late 18th century and especially the early 19th century through the contact with the American contact with the Barbary Coast and Turks as well. I think it was Henry David Thoreau, perhaps, that had Turkish slippers and would put them on. But there's more to playing Eastern. There's a fascination in artistic culture of white American artistic culture of the early 19th century, depicting Americans in Turkish dress. What to me is more interesting is the literary playing Eastern, where Americans and white Westerners conceive of themselves as Muslims or Oriental or Eastern people, and composing poetry in the style of the translations of poetry from the Muslim majority regions that they were reading, such as Hafiz and, of course, Omar Khayyam, who was translated famously by Edward Fitzgerald, the Rubaiyat, and which I think came out in the 1830s and sparked a large wave of imitation poetry, and people conceiving themselves as being Eastern and Oriental in some way. We have, of course, and I talk about this in, I have 2 books on conversion to Islam in the United States. Volume 2, which focuses on African Americans, but also Volume 1, which gets more into the 19th century stuff, because we have evidence of first of all, the emergence of conversion to Islam among white Americans has a specific genealogy among esoteric religiosity in the United States. And esoteric religiosity develops out of what's called the practice of spiritualism. And that's, as we know today, where people sit in a seance room around the table and spirits of the dead supposedly come to visit people, and sometimes supposedly inhabit the bodies, or at least the mouths, of people. And there's evidence that people were playing Eastern here. They were claiming to be the Prophet Muhammad, for example. They're claiming to be just Muslims in general. And occasionally there's a novel written by abolitionists, a white abolitionist, Sergeant, Epi Sargent, I believe, who is also a spiritualist, who has a American enslaved Muslim in this novel. And to the extent that writing a novel has one creatively playing the character, has the author creatively playing the characters of that novel, that is playing Eastern. And we have evidence, of course, of the development of esoteric communities that identified with Muslims and other Eastern identities. And were they simply playing Eastern? And I'm thinking of Pascal Beverly Randolph's Rosicrucian groups and the Theosophical Society in particular, as well as the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor.
Okay, beautiful. You have a follow up to that, Robon? If not, I'm gonna go to. Can you tell us about the mosque that was founded in Detroit?
The mosque founded.
Yeah, speaking about the one that you briefly just spoke about in 1921, and on that highland in Michigan, like, were they like Syrian migrants? Who were those individuals?
Primarily Syrian migrants, but there were also, and remember, at this time, Sunnis and Shia worship together because there's so few Muslims, and this is before the true era of widespread Salafism. So people are coming through their more traditional faiths and their more traditional practices of where it's not book based, it's largely tradition based, and they found brotherhood with Muslims of a wide variety of backgrounds, including Ahmadiyya Muslims, who are rejected as non-Muslims by the majority of Sunni and Shia Muslims today. They were there as well, a few of them. And in addition, there is evidence that we know there is a newspaper article of a Moroccan Muslim who was married to an African American who had visited the Detroit community, and so there's pictures of other African Muslims who were involved in the greater Detroit area, as well as most famously Sati Majid, a Sudanese missionary who helped organize Muslims in Detroit, and as well as in Pittsburgh, New York City, Buffalo, Cleveland, and other locations as well. And Duce Muhammad Ali, the Garveyite from England, who claimed to be a Sudanese Egyptian, he was joined up with the community in Detroit. And again, there's some evidence of African American converts, Sunnis, who converted under Sati Majid, and Ahmadiyya, who converted under the Ahmadiyya missionary from India, Mufti Muhammad Sadiq, that they had joined up. And the Moroccan Muslim that there's a newspaper report about, he pointed out that the Arabs, who were the dominant ethnic group in Detroit in Highland Park, were upset because of the practices of the Ahmadiyya Muslims were not in conformity with the dominant Arab practices. So there was some openness to diversity, but it wasn't complete openness.
Okay. All right. Let me see what we have here.
It's interesting because he's leading into my next question.
Right. Question was who were they, what did they teach, and you actually answered that already anyway.
Right.
So with this thing, so do say Muhammad and the organizations that he wound up creating, do you think that those had like a big impact on that African American community, or was it just like his broader international appeal to like different migrants and the people in that area?
Well, my theory is no, he did not have a direct impact on conversion, but I feel confident that there is some impact because, and I forget the names of all the organizations he was involved with in Detroit.
I think one is the AIUS and the Asiatic Association. Those is two of them.
Right. I'd have to pull it up, and I have my book open here, but let me just look this up real quick. Because I think it'll probably get overlooked. Blue. Okay, here we go. 75. I can't find it. Let's see. We have evidence from a 1939 newspaper article of a Moorish American who was claimed to be a member of an organization that Dusay Muhammad Ali had started before his departure in, I think, 1929 or 1930, which is extremely early. And there are pictures from Detroit newspapers that show the community of people who were worshiping with Dusay Muhammad Ali. And, you know, it's theorized that some of them may have been African American. There are certainly black faces. But other than those two pieces of evidence, I'm not aware. Oh, and there is a newspaper article from the 1940s that insisted that Dusay had converted people in Detroit, African Americans in Detroit, in the 1920s. And this is a newspaper article from I believe the Detroit Free Press, or maybe the Detroit News, in the 1940s. So several years after the fact. And I talked with Sally Howell, who wrote the main history of Islam in Detroit. It's called Old Islam in Detroit, the main history. And we talked about that because she was aware of it. And she says that her opinion, and this is when I talked with her about it, which is probably a long time ago now, probably 10 years ago now, but I don't think any new evidence has come out since then, that, you know, this reporter may have been misremembering things because there's no other evidence. And she interviewed all sorts of people from Detroit to find out if she could trace anything further back, because there were other African-American Muslims who were becoming Sunni by the 1940s, but no one could trace, and there's plenty of evidence about Dusay Muhammad Ali there, but no one could trace a direct lineage to Dusay Muhammad Ali. And so other than the photographs, the 1939 article about the Moor who claimed membership, and, you know, the disputed claim from the 1940s, there's no, as far as I'm aware, no hard evidence of a greater impact. He, of course, in my opinion, had a much greater impact on the interest in Islam through his work with the Universal Negro Improvement Association led by Marcus Garvey.
Right. I opened to a book now that you were speaking about it, and yeah, it's called the UIS, and it's interesting because that where he had this organization is 2 blocks away from the founding of the NOI on Hastings Street.
Right.
And also, when we looked at more research on it, when he does, Marcus Garvey originally works for his newspaper, his African Oriental Times, and then later on, when he comes here, the role switches. But with that being said, when we look at Marcus Garvey, do you think that Islam from Dusay Muhammad or the Ahmadiyya movement influenced of Islam or spread of Islam in the African American community?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. Could you restate the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said, with that being said, with Dusay's influence and with the Ahmadiyya movement all being part or working with the UNIA, do you see that as having an impact on the spread of Islam in the Black community?
100%. As a matter of fact, my argument is that everything stems from that connection. Because, I consider myself a historian, but I've studied sociology, and I want to be sometimes I go too far, but I consider my approach highly sociological. How do movements organize? And they don't just, and we could take a religious perspective in that things were divinely ordained and that's why things happen. But, that's up to each individual. As a historian and a sociologist, I want to remain agnostic and about how movements develop. And we can tend to see patterns, especially in the 20th century. They have certain patterns and processes how movements develop, such as Alden Morris wrote a great book, Sociological Perspective on the Development of the Civil Rights Movement in Alabama, and how everyone knows that, African American Black church was the center of Black life in most of the 20th century. Okay. But how exactly do people organize? Well, what he found was that the leaders were all it was very common for the leaders to have been veterans. And then so these were people who knew how to organize each other. And they knew how to be disciplined and work in line with each other, and how to be brave in the face of violence. And you have veterans, especially among the clergy. And then you have the use of media to connect people, such as newsletters, journals, and public media as well. And all these elements work together, and the civil rights movement expanded. It got the white liberal Christians involved, and through their organizational structures. Everything usually movements develop through pre-existing organizations. However, local pre-existing organization and unified people cannot expand beyond that organization unless there is a greater movement connecting people. And my argument is that the Ahmadiyya movement comes in 1920 with Mufti Muhammad Sadiq, and he starts converting people. But he can't convert. He doesn't really start converting a lot of people till he connects with people involved with the the UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association. We have Abdul Hamid Sulieman, who leads a Canaanite temple out of presumably Harlem and Newark. He doesn't start getting recognition until he, is connecting with do say Muhammad Ali and the UNIA and appears in their newspaper. Sati Majid says a lot of his followers had been in the UNIA in the 1920s. And there's some evidence that Moorish Science Temple of America people had been connected with the UNIA. And we do know that some people in Detroit in the 1930s have been connected with the UNIA, and they were some Muslims in the 1930s. So it was a mass movement. And had the mass movement not existed, the UNIA not existed, and been able to spread through their extremely popular newspaper, the Negro World, a message that people were reading throughout the Atlantic world, and everybody was reading the same message. And it was one that contained many pro-Islam notions. Had that not already existed, I don't think the Muslim movement could have existed in the way that it did. It would probably have remained, little isolates. And we have evidence that there were African American converts out in California among South Asian immigrants out in California, Southern California. But there was Garveyites out there, and they were the ones organizing people and bringing in a Muslim immigrant, supposedly from Egypt. And they were promoting his book, The Garveyites in California. The Garveyites and the leaders of the Garveyites frequently had local influence in the community. The local leaders of the Garveyites were outstanding business owners in their communities. They were outstanding Masons. They were outstanding church members. And so they already had networks of followers, of people who respected, followed them, and heeded their advice. And so when they joined up with the Garvey movement, that helped unite that. So unite the Garvey movement, and then the newspaper further amplified it. So if we're studying the development of Islam in America among African Americans, and we're looking for causes of why it spread so rapidly in the 1920s, which it absolutely did, and there's just abundant evidence of it, suddenly starting around 1920. It's because of all these connections with the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And don't forget, of course, Noble Drew Ali in the Holy Quran, the Moorish Science Temple of America, identifies Marcus Garvey as his forerunner. And Elijah Muhammad would later identify Marcus Garvey as an important preceding figure, and Malcolm X as well. So there's no question in my mind that if we're looking at from a historical, agnostic, sociological perspective, it's the UNIA that served as the core, the rocket that made African American Islam the movement that it was.
Okay. I don't know if Rob wants to skip this question over, but what role did Edward Blyden's book have on African Americans in accepting Islam?
Blyden's book, remind me, I'll probably missay it, Islam, Christianity, and the African, I believe, I can't remember, and it came out, I think, in the 1880s. And Blyden was a Caribbean, and I can't remember where he was from, but I have seen evidence that the book was read widely, and he promoted Islam as a religion that had civilized, and using that term in the Nation of Islam sense, civilized, provided structure and discipline and intellectual development and capitalistic enterprise among West Africans. And his his book was widely read, widely known. Marcus Garvey had read it. You say Muhammad Ali had read it. And it had even, and I know we're focused on African Americans, but I found it fascinating that it had even, there's evidence that had even influenced Alexander Russell Webb, the white convert, to embrace Islam. So there's all sorts of, everyone saying, I'm sorry, not everyone, but a lot of early people involved with the UNIA and other Black nationalist and even communist groups had read Edward Blyden, and we have evidence. Champion magazine, which came out of Chicago in the 1910s, cited Blyden many times and promoted the idea that Islam could be the salvation for Black people across the world. And then when we get to Marcus Garvey's movement, not only Marcus Garvey himself and Dusé Muhammad Ali, but also Edward Bruce was another fan of Blyden. He was highly influential in the development of the UNIA, and he gave speeches, just like Marcus Garvey and Dusé Muhammad Ali, promoting Islam and endorsing Islam, not as necessarily a religion to convert to, but a religion that should be respected, should be admired, and has provided oppressed people a real salvation, a physical, material salvation through liberation from slavery and through economic and spiritual independence. So it was important as a founding ideological text.
Okay, nice. Is there any, I'm going to probably mispronounce this guy's name. Is there any new information about how Muhammad Barakatullah impacted the African American community?
New information about it. Not as far as I know. And Barakatullah, Muhammad Barakatullah, wow, that's a deep cut there. And I don't know if people are talking about him at all. But he was connected with the Muslims in England. He was himself South Asian, and he was connected with the Muslims in England, and came to the U.S. in possibly the 1890s. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I looked into him. But we do know he was talking about Islam and promoting Islam among both white and Black audiences. And there was an article that appeared in the Washington Bee, a Black newspaper out of Washington, D.C., in like 1908, in which he endorsed Islam as a religion to convert. And later in the 1920s, he did affiliate somewhat with the UNIA, and but it's unclear. I couldn't find good evidence about what he was specifically doing with the UNIA. So it's hard to say what exactly his impact was. But we do know he is an early arguer for the position that African Americans should convert to Islam.
All right. Let me see what's the next question. What is the significance of Mecca Medina Temple of ancient free and operative Masons and its founder?
Well, the Mecca Medina Temple first came to my attention when researching Abdul Hamid Sulieman and the Canaanite temple in the 1920s. And he claimed that in 1910, he had founded the Mecca Medina Temple. of ancient free and operative Masons. And just through internet searches, I was able to identify that there was indeed a Mecca Medina temple of I believe it was of ancient free and operative Masons that had been founded in 1910. And this, let's step back here and talk a little bit about who Abdul Hamid Sulieman was, what we know about him. He claimed to be Egyptian. He claimed to be 77 years old in 1922 or 23. I think both, actually. Both years, but not that age when he died in the 1930s. And there is evidence that he had been among African Americans in Washington and probably other states, including in the Eastern Seaboard, Southern Eastern Seaboard, possibly promoting himself as a Muslim, as well as a hoodoo doctor, someone who could handle, who cured people or healed or fixed their ailments through the use of root work and other esoteric practices, but also promoted the idea that African Americans should move to Africa. And this is before Marcus Garvey. This is the early 1900s. Since there's evidence that he did indeed found a Mecca Medina temple in 1910, and that later in the 1920s, he continued to promote this Mecca Medina temple, and also promoted as a leader of the Canaanite temple that it was a Islamic organization and that its members were Muslims. Therefore, it's, I think, completely logical to speculate that in his Mecca Medina temple, which has a strong Islamic focus, obviously, as its name indicates, that people may have embraced Islam, and that this was more than a mere competitor, copycat competitor to the Black Shriner movement, which did have multiple copycats and competitors. There were different Black Shriner movements at the time, and they were not embracing Islam. But it's possible that his was different. We don't know, have any evidence beyond that. But that's as far as I know the current state of research.
All right, beautiful, beautiful. I'm learning while I'm listening to all of this. Now, two-part question. Who was Noble Drew Ali and what was his real name?
His real name. That's a loaded question. What was his real name?
Itself.
Well, Noble Drew Ali is the founder of the Moorish Science Temple of America. And the earliest evidence that we have of the Moorish Science Temple of America, objective evidence, is 1925, 1926 in Chicago. And he led the fastest, to that point, what was the fastest growing African American movement, Islamic movement, because it, looking at the group's newspapers, which gave estimates for temple sizes, it suggests that the movement grew to roughly 7,000 people by the time of his death in 1929. And that greatly eclipsed anything that had preceded it, as far as we know. The Ahmadiyya movement maybe had 1,000 people by the time Mufti Muhammad Sadiq left in 1923, left the United States. Maybe another 1,000 people at most after that. But the Moorish Science Temple of America grew rapidly, and it is from the MST of A, that a lot of subsequent movements stemmed because after Noble Drew Ali died in 1929, it caused a great schism between the different factions within the movement, and different people took the teachings and applied it to other places. I will say a couple other important things. One, he claimed to be a prophet, and he compiled different works, but he produced a book called The Holy Quran, the Moorish Science Temple of America, and he claimed to have prophetic knowledge about the history and destiny of African Americans, and insisted that their true and divine names were not African Americans. They were not black. They were not Negro. They were not colored. They were Moors. They were Moorish Americans, and from the Il and Bay tribes, and apparently Ali tribe as well. He had, as a prophet, he had a solution to their problems that they were facing in America. What was his true name? It was widely attested among early members of the Moorish Science Temple of America that his birth name was Timothy Drew. I think there's solid evidence based on genealogical and now newspaper resources that prior to 1925, and perhaps even during 1925, even during the 1920s, he identified as Thomas Drew. But we don't know if that for sure was his birth name. Perhaps he was born Timothy Drew and his name was changed for whatever reason that people's names changed. And we have evidence that, as I mentioned earlier, he worked as a healer, Islamic healer, Eastern healer, somewhat in New Jersey and presumably other states. It's claimed that he worked in other states as well in the late 1910s and early 1920s. And I believe in 1916, he was not claiming to be, according to the newspaper evidence, he was not claiming to be a Muslim, just a more Eastern-oriented healer. There are a lot of rumors about what he did before, and there's a whole theory out there by the scholar Jacob Dorman about his pre-1916 life, pre-1913 life, that he worked as a circus performer, which I'm not fully convinced, but I'm not unconvinced either. I don't dispute it. I don't reject that outright. But I'm
talking about Walter Brister stuff, right?
About the Walter Brister.
And coincidentally, I just interviewed him like a week ago too.
Oh, you did? Mm.
Yeah, I'm going to show that probably next Friday or next Tuesday. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm not fully convinced. I've told him that. He knows that. But so, putting that aside, there's different theories around, what Noble Drew Ali was doing prior to 1913, for instance. Was he working as an expressman, as a porter? There's a picture that has circulated in Moorish literature that supposedly identifies him as wearing a porter's uniform. And there's supposedly a picture of the Canaanite temple, the original Canaanite temple in Newark, New Jersey. There are claims that he traveled to the east and studied under different teachers. It's possible he studied under Abdul Hamid Sulieman, the founder of the Mecca Medina temple. I don't know. I can only talk about the evidence I've seen, and there's a lot of rumors out there. I mean, there's rumors Robert Dannon, who wrote Black Pilgrimage to Islam, he's let me see his interviews that he conducted in researching his book in the 80s and 90s. And he went, and when he was in Cleveland, he met a Moor, or a person who had been affiliated with Moors, who said that they had been taught, or not that they've been taught, but there had been a rumor that Noble Drew Ali had been influenced by Alexander Russell Webb at his supposedly occult bookstore, which I have no evidence of him having an occult bookstore, but he did have a reading room in New York. And there's all sorts of different theories. And so, I'd like to stick with what I know. And we know he was in Newark promoting himself as a Muslim mystic by 1920, and presumably as a vague Eastern mystic in 1916, and then later founded the Moorish Science Temple of America.
Beautiful.
Yeah, you took me on a journey with that one, because I was like, what is this source? And I think it was the Newark Evening newspaper. So I contacted the library, and they just sent me a bunch of articles, and I'm reading this story, and I'm like, oh, his name's Thomas. I'm like, oh, you was a healer, as you say. And then you get to see he gets arrested for this, he gets bail on it. And the story, like when he's in court, say he has these clairvoyant powers. And I'm like, wow. So this is like prior. I mean, before he becomes this person. So that information led me to understand that card that we always see, the Egyptian adept with the act. Now that kind of made sense. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I'll respond just to add to that for listeners who maybe, the Egyptian adept card, what it was is a business card that said Professor Drew, Egyptian adept. And it had a Newark address, and it said he was a healer, and he was a Muslim, not a Moor, but a Muslim. And it gave the hours of day he was operating at. And if you look in those newspaper articles that Rob Bowen just mentioned, you see the Egyptian adept. You see his name was Professor Drew, Professor Thomas Drew. You see that he was healing people just like on the business card. You see the exact same office hours. And you see the birthday. They gave his birthday, which is January 8th, Noble Drew Ali's birthday. So there's very little doubt in my mind that these are the same people. And I do see that there's a question here from Mr. Flex. So is the story true that Noble Drew Ali was in Egypt when he possibly achieved his enlightenment? I don't have historical evidence for that, but so it is possible. I'm not going to say it's not.
Have you heard of that story before? Because I think that it would probably correlate with the Egyptian adept thing that you both were talking about just now.
Yeah, I think well, that has a lot to probably do with Deuce Muhammad too, and possibly I don't know. It got a lot to do with the Eastern Oriental attitude that was going on in that time period. As far as Egypt, everybody was claiming Egypt at some point. But Go ahead, Dr. Bowen. You could build on that.
Well, not only everyone was claiming Egypt, but connections with Egypt. Everyone, there was a lot of intellectual claims of connections to Egypt, but traveling to Egypt and supposedly going to the pyramids and in the adept chamber of the pyramid, this is, there's precedent for it in esoteric literature. So there's that. But the other theory that I connect with it, is that Jamal Afghani, who had lived in Egypt, came to America, and there was a theory put out there that he influenced Noble Drew Ali. So is it possible that he traveled with Afghani to Egypt or something like this? I don't see strong evidence of that, and I don't even know of Dusay Muhammad Ali visiting Egypt, but Dr. Dorman is the current leading light on Dusay Muhammad Ali. Since you were aware of him and his new thesis that he's put out there, so he's a better resource on that.
All right. I like that. All right. Let me see. Do you have any new information on the identity of Farad Muhammad?
New information. Well, since I published my book, there has been the book by John Andrew Morrow, and he's proposed some arguments about using testing, DNA testing. It's called Finding WD Farad. I'm not 100% convinced. Textual evidence based on, he's also, asserted some textual evidence based on some teachings in the Nation of Islam that they have perhaps some Shia resonances. And I think, yes, they do. And there have been theories about that have been proposed for many years. Possibly Sufi influences. I was just looking at Hakim Shabaz's book from like the early 1990s. He had all these theories of theosophical influences and Sufi influences and things like that. And I think they're good paths to pursue, but I don't know of anything new since Morrow. I've heard of people proposing that there's certain digital analyses that people can do, like on pictures and things like that. But as far as I can tell, they haven't produced persuasive evidence along those lines. So I think the, state of research is roughly hasn't moved much. And I may be wrong. After I finished volume 2 in 2017, I completely shifted my interest to working on the era of 1975 to 2001. So I have not really kept up as much as I should have. But the state of research, as far as I'm aware, suggests that he was an immigrant on the western coast in Oregon, Washington, California, possibly came from Pakistani or Afghan background, and was indeed identical with the individual that wound up in San Quentin prison in the 1920s. And so I would love to hear today if there's been any updated proposals of new identities for him.
Wow.
I don't know. I don't think.
Have you read the book by Dr. Who is he? Master Farad Muhammad. Who is he? Who is he not?
I'm sorry. The book by who?
Malcolm, you're chipping out.
Talking about the book by Dr. Wesley Muhammad, who he is and who he is not.
No, I haven't read that. Can you tell me the thesis?
The thesis really is based off of that. So when we talking about the person from the San Quentin individual,
mm-hmm.
and the background of how the newspaper gets it from Ed Montgomery, and he sends them this dossier from the FBI, and it says founder of Nation of Islam is white guy, and his parents are from New Zealand. He has a common wife named Hazel Burton, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So the FBI goes and they go to this New Zealand to try to find his parents, not can't do it. They find this common law wife, and when they find the wife describes him and says that he looks like a dark-skinned Mexican. This picture you're showing me is not him.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right. Okay.
That's the kind of thesis of is this the same person of that?
Right. And I believe Dr. Wesley Muhammad, as True Islam, proposed this in the Book of God, which I believe was originally published in like 1999.
Yeah.
And so he's been on that, going back to then. So I am somewhat familiar with that that argument, and I'm not convinced that that argument is proves anything other than maybe they went down the wrong trail. And I think what is more persuasive is the fingerprint evidence. Of course, we don't know. Yeah, they could have supposedly the fingerprint evidence from California, from San Quentin, matched the fingerprint evidence from Detroit. We don't know. Yeah, they could have planted it. I take everything with a grain of salt. I'm not committed to any one thing. I think the evidence more points to the San Quentin individual, but I'm not persuaded that going the New Zealand line was really the only legitimate line to pursue, and that there are other possible resources for us to investigate. But I'm not going to say he's wrong. It may be 100% the fact that this person on the West Coast who happened to be claiming some of the very same claims that we know another San Quentin prisoner, a Black Muslim, was also claiming at the same time.
Oh, you're going past the questions, Pastor. You're moving too fast.
Actually, that's the next question.
Okay.
Okay. How about Lucas Lehman, right?
Yeah.
Was that the next question, or was it another one?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Okay.
Right.
So continue then. Continue on the bill. Go ahead.
Okay. So Lucius Lehman. I discovered him while looking through the UNIA newspaper in 1922 or 1923. I can't remember the year. Going through the microfilm, and there's this letter. I think it says, Allah for the Africans or I can't remember, like something along these lines, but he's from San Quentin prison. So I go back and look through the digital newspapers and the San Quentin. I request from the state of California the prison records of this individual. And he was claiming, and at various times, because he was a fascinating figure, that he was one time called the colored genius, highly intelligent individual. And in the 1920s was claiming to be a mullah in San Quentin prison, Islamic teacher or professor, effectively, highly knowledgeable individual that could determine the correct interpretation of Islam. And when looking back at the evidence of his activities in California, we find that he had, prior to being incarcerated, at some points claimed to have been trained in diplomatic service in London, and I believe other places as well, that he was of mixed race. He claimed at one point to be the child of the son of Napoleon and a Sudanese wife, that he could speak several languages. I can't remember the exact number he claimed. It probably changed from time to time because his claims were very inconsistent. He was very nationalistic. black nationalistic, and he went to prison for murder. But when looking into the circumstances surrounding his life and imprisonment, and looking at the fact that he was always recognized as being highly intelligent, and in fact was at the birth of the Pentecostal movement in California at the Azusa Street Revival, which is widely regarded as the birth of the modern Pentecostal movement. Of course, Pentecostalism had existed before the Azusa Street Revival, but it organized and became a full-fledged movement at the Azusa Street Revival. And he was there, and he was accepted among many people there as being an expert in languages. It seems unlikely that he was, but he was able to convince that many people that he was. And there's other evidence that he may have most likely felt deep resentment at his lot in life as a black man that seemed to be more intelligent than the people around him, and yet could not progress past being a brick and tile maker. And he tried to find other avenues of work, but things always happened, and eventually he went to prison for murder. But it's a fascinating story, and we can't quite connect him with W.D. Wallace Ford in San Quentin prison, the supposed true identity of Farad Muhammad, Wallace Ford. We can't quite connect him with there because Wallace Ford arrived in prison a few months after Lucius Sulieman left prison in San Quentin. However, we do know from the Negro World, the UNIA newspapers, that prisoners were claiming that they had been 100. In one letter, it says we were 100% Garveyized. The black prisoners in San Quentin, 100% Garveyized. And if they were 100% Garveyized in the early 1920s, that means they were interested in Islam. And if you have, they were likely interested in Islam. And if you have a highly intelligent man claiming to be a black Muslim among Garveyites in prison at that time, which he was, it seems very reasonable to conclude that there would be discussion of him even upon his release, and that may have influenced claims later made by Farad Muhammad, if he was indeed there as Wallace Ford at the time.
Okay, beautiful. By studying the teachings of Farad Muhammad, do you think that any of his teachings bring light to his origins?
It's hard to say. I know Paul Guthrie had a good idea at one point several years ago to look at and compare the educational texts in South Asia with educational text. And I know you have Paul Guthrie on now. I don't know if he talked about this with the lessons, the NOI lessons, and to see if there was a good comparison. I think he abandoned that, but I thought it was a good avenue for research. However, I am aware that there has been a very persuasive argument made that has not been published yet, but it's about to be published, that shows the teachings have very clear sources, and point towards his specific history. I'm not going to break that story now because it's coming.
Who you said have that information? Who you said have it?
Who what?
You said somebody have that information and is about to break it. Who you said have that information?
I can't. I don't want to say. I don't want to take his shine away. And and I was showing that in confidence.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And you said these were lessons. You said these were lessons that were supposed to be published.
It's an analysis and comparison of the lessons with other texts that were extremely similar and point to a very likely source which sheds light on his identity. Yeah.
When we gotta look out for this? Where is this?
I can't say. I can't say.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I was so
Well,
bad in confidence.
I'm interviewing a couple of people. Hopefully, one of them is that person. Hopefully.
I hope so too. I want it to come out.
Yeah. All right. Did he say when that is coming out?
No, but it has a publisher and everything. And so I'm sure it'll make waves. I'm sure you'll find out pretty soon.
Okay. That's very good. All right. Your turn, Raw. Anything else you want to add on?
Man, he just threw me off with that one, man.
Threw me off with that one, man. So I'll keep it on your book. I think you had there's a chapter we were talking about Farad text. Pointed out some things of
Some miscellaneous Masonic texts.
We talked about like those 104 books. He told Elijah that he should read, but no one never saw them. He gave some text on all context behind that. Did you see Andrew's new thing on the Bible of Islamicism uncovered?
Yeah, and he identified it solidly as Deliverance by Rutherford.
Oh yeah.
I feel that was a strong argument. That was a very strong argument, and I'm fairly convinced
that parts of certain parts of the teachings come directly from the Jehovah's Witness deliverance text.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
I think it's a good argument.
What's the name again, Garfield?
You gotta wait till you see the next person who's coming on. We're not telling you.
We
moving in secret over here.
Come on, Rob.
We're gonna tune in next Sunday, not this Sunday. Next Sunday. That's Maro, right? Anthony Maro.
Yeah, that's
Maro.
Yeah, I got Maro. So he's got a lot to bring out. He got a lot to bring out too. So we're gonna talk about the article, which I mean, it's not to knock Farad Muhammad or anything. It's just that we want to get an idea where stuff comes from. You know, I mean, some people might believe it's supernatural. You know, he got it beamed to him like Scotty, you know, or whatever. So, but I mean, I'm like this. I'm like Raw Bond too. We're like always on a fact finding mission. We want to know where this comes from. I want to see the words. Why did he use this? How did he use it? And that's what we're looking at. You know, but I think everybody has something to bring to the table. I think Dr. Boyd has a lot to bring to the table. I think Mara has a lot to bring to the table. I think even the brother you spoke about, Jacob S. Berman, he has a lot to bring to the table. But the thing is, the reason why I respect these guys as scholars, because they're on the outside. They don't have no vested interest. When you don't have no vested interest, as you said, an agnostic historian, sociologist, you don't have no vested interest at all. None at all. So when you bring the information, you're not trying to say, I'm tearing these guys down or tearing this guy down. You're actually trying to put out information that you could actually find. And I think you helped us, Dr. Bowen, in actually researching more and trying to find more, like, where he got this from. We going through your work. We like, where he got this from. We going to find this source and find out where that person got that from. So at the end of the day, I think you bring a lot to the table. I hope to speak to you again, you know, I mean, in the future, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a Islam, the origins of Islam to the African American community, volume 1, part 1, part 2, part 3. I'll probably make yours part 1, and Jacob Dorman part 2, and then Mara part 3, and then we see where we go from there.
Okay.
All right.
Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Hold on one second, Dr. Bowen. Malcolm Flex, do you have any last questions for the doctor, or are you good?
I think I'm okay right now. I think I like what I heard. I learned a lot this morning. I'm over here on the West Coast, so it's still morning time over here. I took a lot of notes, and I'm also interested in what do you say the name of your book again, Mr. Bowen?
History of Conversion to Islam in the United States. And it's two volumes. Volume 3 should be out this year.
All right. Hey,
what is volume 3 covering?
1975 to 2001, all ethnicities. So it's history of W.D. Muhammad, the deep history of Louis Farrakhan movement. The deep history is stuff that no one's talked about before, in terms of how it grew in the 70s and early 80s.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this now. That means you have a copy of the tape called The Bakery from 1979. That means you heard that.
I've heard it, but it's way beyond that. Way beyond that.
Okay. I thought it was
so. Is this going to be coming out in your more recent edition? Is the Minister Farrakhan's movement? Okay.
All right. What you said this year? It's coming out this year, so we got to bring it back.
Hopefully. Oh yeah, maybe.
Talk about that because he's alive. He's still alive and kicking. He does have a wonderful day. So
So I'm telling you, Garvey, you told me to come up with it. It's too much to talk about. Like it's just too much.
No, we got
more than an hour, man.
Come on, man. This is like a class right here. This is like a class you could teach every day. This is beautiful. But let me ask you this: out of all the movements that you found with Islam and African Americans, which one you think has won? And the reason why I say that, I'm using the term Daniel Pipes used a couple of years ago when he wrote the article about Elijah Muhammad won, because he feeling that Warith D. Muhammad had 1 million followers and Farrakhan had like 10% of that, and he just felt like Elijah Muhammad's teachings won as far as the Islam in America.
Okay. Well, I would say do they win? Okay. First of all, if you look at the Pew Research, Pew Research is mass demographic research about religious adherence in the United States. If you look at the Pew Research, there's been a decline in African American Islam. Fewer people are identifying this. But the majority of people who do identify as Muslim majority of them stem from the Fardian or Elijah Muhammad lineage. And even to the extent that people come from the independent Dar al-Islam, Islamic Party in North America, Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood. Obviously, the Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood stems from Nation of Islam because it comes from followers of Malcolm X. The Dar al-Islam, they were influenced. They broke away from more traditional conservative Islam when they were influenced by Elijah Muhammad's teachings. Islamic Party in North America, and they rejected Elijah Muhammad's teachings, but they were also influenced by the activism. And everywhere you look, how did Islam spread? In the 90s, in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. I mean, how many people know of a Muslim that joined Louis Farrakhan or worked in Muhammad in the 90s and 2000s because they listened to rap music? I mean, it is one of the biggest propagators of Islam, and it all comes from Elijah Muhammad's teachings, whether it's through the 5% or it's through the straight Nation of Islam stuff like Public Enemy. If you look at Gallup polls, which measure public adherence or public interest in Islam in America, if you look through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, you look at it, there's only one American Muslim movement, and it's Elijah Muhammad's movement through Louis Farrakhan and through Malcolm X, who are measured as highly influential. This is did Elijah Muhammad win? I mean, Islam in America would not be here if it were not for Marcus Garvey. It would not be here if it were not for Noble Drew Ali. But it would not be a widespread phenomenon today without Farad Muhammad and Elijah Muhammad.
Mm-hmm.
That's my argument. So did he win? Well, put that in perspective with whatever else you think, and that's my perspective.
Yeah, this is the article on the screen from two. Go ahead, Malcolm.
No, I was just saying that those are great points, and I would agree with those sentiments, and that's basically how we were taught as well. So yeah, definitely great points.
Yeah, this is the article from June 2000 by Daniel Pipes, How Elijah Muhammad Won. Yeah, pretty good
The
article.
dominant faith among Black Americans. It's not the dominant faith, but it
may become the dominant
oh,
faith.
okay.
Islam may become the dominant faith, which you said it's on decline now anyway. But hey, that's good. Good stuff. Hey, thank you for your perspective, man. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. I appreciate you, man. Much love, much respect. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Patrick Bowen. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, man. You have a lot of information in there. We can't cover it all, but you have some interesting figures in there. That D. Sulieman guy, whoo, it's very interesting, man.
Yeah, all right. Hey, Robon, do you want to carry on, or you just want me to end the recording right now?
You can end it.
All right. Thank you, Dr.